Yo, you see the city? San Faro. Lots of craziness, lots of opportunities, lots of choices, but only one that matters. Be a somebody, or be a nobody.
Death of a Game, All Points Bulletin. What do you get when you take the creator of Grand Theft Auto, Crackdown, and the idea of those being realized in an MMO format? All Points Bulletin. One of the most hyped MMOs you probably never heard of. People for some time had said taking a Grand Theft Auto title and making it an MMO could be a great success. GTA Online's popularity supports that assertion. That's what Apb looked to do. But Apb faced many troubles in its short tenure, and still struggles to exist today. Why was Apb such a failure? What caused Apb's slow death? Those are questions we look to answer on this next episode of Death of a Game, the series where we talk about games or companies that have died over the past couple of years and attempt to analyze the largest contributing factors and such. David Jones, the man behind the successful games turned series Lemmings and Grand Theft Auto, at least one of the men behind Grand Theft Auto. He helped form DMA Design back in 1987, the company behind these two titles, alongside Russell Kay, Steve Hammond, and Mike Daly. Dave, as he was often called, left DMA Design, which shortly after became nothing other than Rockstar North. Dave went on to form his own company, Real Time Worlds, in early 2002. 4 years later, on December 11th, 2006, New Enterprise Associates announced an investment of $30 million into Real Time Worlds. 1 year after that, 2007, Real Time Worlds released their first title, Crackdown, to much critical acclaim. It was an Xbox 360 exclusive title and was also widely regarded by its fans. Building on the momentum of Crackdown's success, Dave proved again he could make a crime action game with just enough of an interesting twist to keep the genre fresh. Continuing to push boundaries, All Points Bulletin, a love child of GTA Crackdown with more of a focus on multiplayer components, was planned as early as 2005, before the launch of Crackdown. Colin McDonald, an executive at Real Time Worlds, stated that Apb was the bastard child of everything we've been striving for over the 15 to 20 years, but also where we want to go in terms of sandbox gameplay and everything that started with Grand Theft Auto and was evolving through Crackdown. It was the culmination of what Real Time's David Jones had been working towards since the late 90s. McDonald claims that Apb will contain what Dave always wanted to do from GTA before Crackdown and Apb. Apb was initially targeted for a PC and Xbox 360 launch in 2008. Instead, this is the period where they launched the aforementioned Crackdown, which played awfully similar to Apb. In 2008, at the GDC, Game Developers Conference, Dave Jones stated that Apb would launch in 2008 and was more of a multiplayer online game than an MMO, say like World of Warcraft. In 2008, Real Time Worlds announced that they had raised $50 million for Apb and other future projects. They also confirmed that they were pushing their initial 2008 launch hopes to 2009. With this announcement also came news of Real Time Worlds repurchasing the rights to distribute Apb, as they had previously given them to Webzen. Real Time also stated that the Crackdown title was their only exclusive contract with Microsoft, and that although Apb was originally supposed to launch on Xbox 360, they would be pushing it for an eventual later launch, as well as a possible launch on the PS3. April 14, 2008, the same month, Gary Dale left his COO position at Take-Two Interactive to assume CEO of Real Time Worlds. Dave Jones stepped down as CEO to be more of a creative leader, a creative director. This is not uncommon when outside investors get involved and a CEO is, well, the creator or the creative. These investors typically like someone with a little bit more of a business focus. June 1st, 2009, Real-Time Worlds announced their partnership with EA. This was to include an exclusive marketing and distribution agreement for North America and Europe. At the time, Apb was billed as a new breed of online game set in a persistent, breathing open-world urban environment where fame and fortune awaits all players. Some players will achieve this by feeding on the city, its people and its businesses, the criminals. Some will live by a higher code and instead feed on the criminals and their organizations, the enforcers. This dynamic where players become the core content for other players is one of the many unique features of Apb. Its deep, rich customization system provides players with the ability to completely personalize their identity, looks, clothing, vehicles, and even music, all to astonishing detail and quality. All of this press was also accompanied by the first official trailer for Apb. 1 month later, and the hopes of a console release are put on ice. EJ Moreland, a lead designer from SOE who worked on EverQuest 2, who now was working at Real-Time Worlds, announced in a video Q&A that Apb would release only for the PC, but could possibly launch on a console at a later time. The game was finally playable for a select few on October 19, 2009, and had a closed beta that ran to June 4th, 2010. I was actually one of the lucky ones who got to play the game during this time. Though with how poor my computer ran the game, the only thing I could really play was probably the character creator. Open beta followed the closed beta shortly after and ran a few days in June of 2010. A few months prior, a fan site named Apb Evolved leaked some pricing information on Apb as well as release dates. The game was set to release in North America on June 29, 2010, and the following month in the UK. Accompanying a traditional subscription of $9.99, there was a 20-hour game time payment of $6.99 as well as possible in-game rewards for creativity and performance that allowed accomplished players to supplement their playtime. You could either pay for your unlimited 30 days of playing, which was the $9 fee, or just have 20-hour game time for $6.99. As the fan site announced originally, Apb was launched on June 29, 2010 in the US. A lot was riding on Allpoint's bulletin, 5 years of development, and a budget in the excess of $100 million. Needless to say, there was a lot riding on the success of Apb. Some would even say the future of Real-Time Worlds as a company. Unfortunately for Real-Time Worlds and the fans of Apb, Apb was not living up to its expectations. Despite the hype and strong marketing campaign, Apb was struggling to get even lukewarm reviews. Even with users, who are often more forgiving than some critics, didn't rate the game above a 5.7 user score on Metacritic. Review websites like GameSpot said, Apb delivers periodic awesomeness, but fundamental imbalances and repetitive objectives make this persistent world shooter a tough sell. PC Gamers said, confused and weightless, Apb doesn't satisfy on any front. Its shooting, driving, story, and objectives are all average at best. Eurogamer said, it's polished, accomplished, and certain aspects of it, such as the metagame structure and player customization, are fantastic. Even so, there's no escaping the fact that the game is hugely disappointing. The flashes of brilliance only serve to throw the mediocrity of the game into even sharper relief. It seemed that nearly all reviewers targeted the unfinished feeling of Apb, as well as having some frankly perplexing design mechanics that some critics say could have probably been fixed with just a little bit more development time. The launch itself wasn't bad, the servers seemed to hold up and the lag wasn't terrible, but the game itself just wasn't cutting it. This was not very good for a game with a budget over $100 million, and at this point, had the entire future of Real-Time Worlds on its back. But instead of quitting, to confirm their dedication to upholding Apb and its possible future for success, Real-Time Worlds came out and said that they would be restructuring the company to focus solely on Apb, which meant pulling from their other unannounced second project. A month after launch, Apb was only able to pull 130,000 players. This number under normal circumstances could be salvageable, but with the amount of time and investment that Real-Time Worlds put into the game, it was not looking good for the company. Shortly after the launch of the game, layoffs hit Real-Time Worlds, which was not really congruent with the previous statements that support for APB would be increasing. The situation only worsened when Real-Time Worlds decided to go in administration mode, which is the Scottish equivalent to bankruptcy. As the Engadget article states, the Scottish developer has named the Begbie's Trainer Group as its administrator, a third party who attempts to rescue an insolvent company while still acting on the interests of its creditors. Much like with bankruptcy, this move isn't exactly the developer's nail in the coffin, but it could mean some radical reorganization is right around the corner. September 16th, 2010 came, and it looked like Real-Time Worlds and its short-lived APB title were coming to an end. At this point, investors were attempting to liquidate the assets, and APB servers were shutting down for good. This marked the end of Real-Time Worlds, which in its heyday was the largest independent game studio in Scotland. But it wasn't quite the end for APB. As the article states, Reloaded Productions, a subsidiary of US-based K2 Network, bought the rights to APB from administrators right after Real-Time went under last summer with debts of more than 50 million. Real-Time Worlds sold for around 784,000, while it was a near 100 million investment. Reloaded Productions would be relaunching APB as APB Reloaded, which would include a free-to-play business model also known as freemium. The premium services allowed for up to 90% bonus XP, 125% bonus on in-game currency, 50% reduced cooldown on activated abilities, and it also unlocked up to 100 layers of customization and gave you a discount for the in-game shop. To the ire of many, they also allowed guns, gear, and vehicles to be bought. For the die-hard fans of APB though, they were just happy to get a chance to play the game again. Or the people who never got a chance to play the game again were just happy to at least try it. Gamers First, who would be publishing the new launch and who purchased the title with their subsidiary Reloaded Production, had this to say about the title. APB was a game that had several exceptional features and some brilliant ideas, even though it was plagued by some initial balance and monetization issues. We want to take all unique features of this title, such as its unparalleled character, weapon, and car customization systems, and convert the game to a true free-to-play game. We are deep into planning and early execution stages for this next chapter of APB, and we hope to share more details in the future. Yeah, it wasn't exactly free-to-play, but we've had that discussion many times. A press release on 10 Ton Hammer stated that Gamers First would be publishing the game and launching it on December 9th, 2011, at all major retail outlets in North America. Despite all the new bells and whistles, APB Reloaded still wasn't able to live up to its original potential. 10 Ton Hammer stated that Allpoint's Bulletin has improved drastically from its original launch, but still isn't necessarily the MMO Grand Theft Auto we've been looking for. And Eurogamer probably put it the best. This isn't a great game, it's not even a good game, but it's the closest thing we've got to a Cops and Robbers MMO, which is, I suspect, one of the all-time great video game concepts. One day, somebody's going to do it right, and they're going to become very rich indeed. That was very ominous of Eurogamer to say, as GTA Online, despite its problems, has been a major success. But back to APB Reloaded. The fans weren't really any kinder. Players of the game struggled to rate the game above a mixed positive review, but even players who really wanted to enjoy the game couldn't because of what they remarked as a poor business model. Freemium isn't inherently bad, but when you give people direct, easy access to buy an advantage at the click of a button, say a vehicle or a car, you're gonna piss off a lot of people. Like most games that go freemium, it was able to hold a relatively average population, enough to keep the game running. Based on estimates from these Steam Spy numbers, as well as player testimonials, we can guesstimate that the population at launch of APB Reloaded was at least above 5,000 players, which despite how low it sounds, isn't terrible due to the lobby nature of the game. Still, much a far cry from APB's initial 130,000 players. As of July 2017, the game struggles to have even over 1,000 players, and has been downward trending for the past couple of months. APB Reloaded also launched on PS4 and Xbox One to almost universal disdain. YouTuber Digital Foundry pointed this out in his video analysis on APB, showcasing how the game on Xbox One struggled to get even 20 FPS. It also had terrible texture load-ins and issues. Now, Apb Reloaded was markedly better than the original Apb, but not by much. Its existence is still nothing close to the original hype behind the title. What happened to Apb? What happened to Real-Time World's vision for the title? Why did Apb fail so spectacularly, ending in the death of Real-Time Worlds, the company behind the game? Before I outline the largest reasons for the game's failure, let's take a second to talk about the legacy Apb left behind. Apb had the hype it did primarily because of Dave Jones, the creative head behind the project. Dave, as mentioned earlier, had his experience developing the first GTA titles and wanted to take a crime action title like GTA or even their more recent Crackdown game and make it an MMO, or at least realize it in some sort of multiplayer format. Although Apb was originally meant to be a multiplayer lobby-based game, it was pushed to being an MMO due to the perceived unlimited potential for content and fun as such. GTA as a series has always been popular, but the series during the development of Apb was especially popular, coming off of San Andreas and GTA 4's success train. Apb was everyone's chance to take one of their favorite styles of game and play it online with friends and against others. You had your in-game currencies, your clans, your factions, your personal vehicles, and you could choose a side, be it enforcer or criminals, and work together. It was like all of those GTA games where we would all wish could be some sort of co-op or at least some online feature to it, and you could just play with all these other people. The best part about Apb though, and the thing that set it apart from GTA and frankly many modern day titles, was probably the customization. One of a kind customization, the best customization in any online game, period. And it's not even close. The sheer amount of options in the game is absolutely overwhelming. And this is primarily because you can create your own designs, which can be saved and then shared with other people. You want to have a clan of all tuxedo-wearing and shade-wearing ruffians or thugs? No problem. You want to be a punk rocker, anarchy-loving clan? You can do that too. How you dress was much more than just wearing different clothes like in some games. It was your character's voice, your way of expressing what kind of player or person you were. Since there wasn't a traditional progression system in Apb, in the sense of at least leveling with talent trees, leveling in the game was about making money, was about buying new clothes, weapons, and vehicles. Customization was a huge focus in the game, and it was a feature that should be remembered, even after Apb dies. Before dissecting what went wrong with Apb, it's important that we spoke about the legacy of the game. In order to understand the death of something, we have to understand what it meant to us while it was living. Apb is not completely dead yet, but the state that it currently exists in could barely qualify as living. How did Apb get to this point? How did a once extremely popular game and franchise with an award-winning developer meet its death? The best way to analyze something is starting from the bottom and working your way up. Say if you are judging the condition of a piece of real estate, for example. Real estate is an apt comparison because the foundation of a house is the most important part. Without a strong foundation, the house is worth far less money and even in some extreme cases can collapse under its weight. A house can look great from the outside, but if the foundations don't hold, it's all for naught. This is my long and convoluted way of comparing the foundation of a house to the foundation of a game, and in this case, All Points Bulletin. Apb was not lacking in vision. If anything, it had too much of a vision. What Apb was lacking in was a solid foundation for a game. The shooting, movement, and driving mechanics were all very clunky. Driving a car felt like driving a boat. Windows for some reason operated as bulletproof shields. The combat was janky. Movement felt clunky when you would turn, and the guns all, most importantly, felt like you were using airsoft guns. There was very little kick or feel to these guns, which made gunfights feel like very repetitive and boring. Coupe that with repetitive missions and little to no matchmaking, which meant that you got matched against the guys with much better weapons than you had, and you have a recipe for a bore-zaster. Yeah, I made that pun. Another example of them deviating from an already shaky foundation was how they started as a multiplayer lobby title and then warped into a MMO, or at least what they called an MMO. This wouldn't have been so problematic if the lobby mechanics they designed weren't so limiting. Nothing feels massive about a 100-person zone, with little to no permanence in it. They advertised there being some sort of guild territory that could be controlled early on, just like a turf war in, say, GTA, but this wasn't ever realized. And as the game was rebranded and relaunched as Apb Reloaded, it became further from that. They seemed to ditch their MMO idea, they being Gamers First in this case, in favor of a more arena lobby-based game. But it's hard to blame Gamers First for that, because the game, at least the base game, was not really an MMO in most senses. The business model itself also just seemed rushed, not really well thought through. Why would you have a monthly sub but also some sort of hourly sub? The price differential between the two wasn't even great enough to warrant buying the 20-hour sub. Why would you when it's only a $3 difference? A $3 difference for unlimited play? A truly silly idea. Just about everyone knows who Steve Jobs was, an incredibly innovative, though at times delusional man. Steve Jobs had an insane aura about him. He was dripping in charisma. Many people called this his personal reality distortion device. Dave Jones, the creative behind Real-Time Worlds, was likened to Steve Jobs due to his own version of a reality distortion device. As explained by a prior Real-Time Worlds employee on his personal blog, Dave's version was also famous, amongst people who had worked with him before. There was a running joke from the old DMA days that everyone should don their tinfoil hats when Dave entered the room to block his mind control rays. There's an old picture from the DMA office of them all sitting with tinfoil hats on, though I couldn't find it. Unfortunately, reality distortion fields do not provide total mind control. They can convince people to believe anything, but they cannot direct people's efforts. Once we became oversized, we being Real-Time Worlds in this case, I think Dave really struggled to direct our projects as he'd have liked. Our best efforts were in our early days when we were small, Crackdown, the early builds of APB including the core of the customization system, and the prototype of My World that essentially won the initial investment. Luke Hallowell, the ex-employee, pointed out that things weren't as bad in the beginning of Real-Time Worlds' operation as a company. But when a creative like Dave Jones is able to run wild without any sort of checks or balances, you end up with a lot of unfinished ideas and very poor management. It's because it's hard to say no to someone like Steve Jobs, or in this case, Dave Jones, because they have these incredible moments of genius and are able to share their vision so effectively that everybody in the room is almost underneath their spell. Crackdown was a major success. It won dozens of awards, as did Lemmings and GTA, both titles that Dave Jones was heavily involved with. It's almost like he just didn't know failure. He hadn't failed making a video game before. To tie in the comparison with Steve Jobs again, at one point in Steve Jobs' career with Apple, he was fired, and the reason he was fired was because he basically made the decision to stick to a certain project over his own personal pride, even though the project was woefully underperforming. The board ended up kicking him because of this. It's because creative types aren't really the types to manage people or projects. This is why they need more the business savvy kind of person to help them run a business and manage a project. But Real-Time Worlds didn't have that. At least, not in a big enough capacity to stop the rampant spending and the very costly amalgamation of ideas that was APB. not everything is the fault of Dave Jones. As convenient as it is to blame him, there were problem mindsets that seem to be ingrained in the very culture at Real-Time Worlds. Despite their goals to build living and breathing online worlds, Real-Time Worlds was awfully inept at interacting with the community, the people who wanted to buy their games. Hollowell explained the culture quite well in his blog post. Here we were, supposedly trying to build these great online games, but we were stunningly inept at outside interaction. There were some high-profile release window gaffes, like attempting to ban the internet reviewing APB for a whole week, and then telling the world that they didn't just understand our game. But it's what we didn't say that was the most harmful of all. We had this incredible secrecy around everything we did. Being unable to receive criticism is something people should remember well from my Arcade video, as Treon Worlds was a major perpetrator of such. But according to Hollowell, and well, the actions of Real-Time Worlds, they weren't very good at it either. Their mentality seemed to be along the lines of, well, if the community doesn't like our game, we should at least try to minimize the poor reviews, and delay it so we can first make money on our title, then fix the game. They basically only wanted criticism after you paid. This led to shady business dealings and the community being misled as a whole. In an interview Dave Jones conducted on Eurogamer, Dave Jones dodged a question about the business model APB would use. Paraphrasing, he essentially said something along the lines of that it was never going to be free, there is a business model, but he just basically kept talking about how unique it was and how they hadn't really ironed it out. That's something that Luke Hallowell disputed in his blog post. Luke explained that, I've heard people complain that we should have considered the business model for APB much earlier on. The truth is, we did. We had it figured out years before release. We just decided not to tell anybody. And inadvertently, gave gamers the impression it was going to be free to play. They weren't too happy when they found that out. So you have scenarios where the company behind APB tried to shield themselves from criticism, and most importantly their game, but also even blatantly misled people concerning their business model of their game, which was a controversial topic for APB. But there were more cases of this. A QA tester on Real-Time Worlds was berated by upper management because he outlined a number of player testimonials that would talk about bugs and glitches in the game. Real-Time Worlds really seemed allergic to outside opinions and even inside opinions, something that seemed to mesh very well with the Dave Jones reality distortion device. It seemed to extend over the entirety of the company, in fact. It's almost like everybody collectively was delusional. Real-Time Worlds and Dave Jones seemed to think that there was no way that they could fail. How could they, after all? They had secured $100 million in funding, were a very respected company who had created Crackdown, which won all these awards, and had Dave Jones, one of the creators of GTA and Lemmings, as their lead designer and creative, even as the walls around them fell. The first hint we got was, a few months after APB launched, the company started, quite bizarrely, to make cleaners redundant. I thought that was rather suspicious, says an ex-member of the My World team. Later, rumors started coming in from Ruffian Games, another Dundee development studio formed by an ex-Real-Time Worlds staff, that redundancies were imminent, and that Real-Time Worlds let all the contractors go early, which was another sign that the money was running out. But they said everything was fine. Almost like the people in the ship couldn't believe that Titanic could sink. Well, spoilers, it sunk. In the end, Real-Time Worlds' most valuable asset wasn't actually APB. It was an internal project titled Project My World, a project that was able to secure most of the $100 million investment that Real-Time Worlds had. Yes, Real-Time Worlds during the development and launch of APB was developing another title in parallel. My World was a world builder simulator, think Google Earth mixed with The Sims. Even as 157 Real-Time World employees were let go, they still kept 23 developers on My World. It was Real-Time's Hail Mary, their last hurrah. When the company shut down in 2010, however, their Hail Mary sold to a tech group who had a few old Real-Time employees for a measly $3 million. Nothing close to what was invested in it or what people had valued it at. But this video, and my point, isn't really about the failure of My World. But My World as a failure did directly impact APB, and by proxy, Real-Time Worlds. It was more evidence of their poor ability to manage. Luke Hallowell also detailing more issues with the way Real-Time Worlds manage things, and how these poor handlings of things led to them blowing through money. More people in one team created knock-on effects elsewhere. More programmers needed to support more artists, more IT, Q and admin staff needed to support everyone else, more project managers needed to manage everything, and more recruiters to hire all these staff. We hired a whole business development group that did, well, nobody else in the company got told what they did, except they hassled development constantly for executive progress reports. Of course, making reports takes time, so this probably contributed to further hiring. Then we hired a director of development who, while certainly helped us focus on on-time delivery, was sadly forced to spend much of his time fending his senior management layer off of our backs. Then we added a program manager reporting to business development to fulfill a nebulous floating cross-company communication role. Someone above us came up with a patent strategy initiative. The engineers dragged along to the meetings managed to fend that off long enough for management to get distracted and forget the whole thing. We hired a live production team whose entire job seemed to be to pass messages between operations, the folks who run the servers, and engineering, on the basis that these two groups were struggling to communicate. Unfortunately, they struggled to communicate with either group and spent a lot of time creating processes for how to pass these messages around. Even just talking about it makes me want to facepalm. It's just so many people, and as that famous saying goes, too many cooks in the kitchen. Having a near 300-person staff is expensive, especially when development goes on for nearly half a decade. This is sort of the startup fallacy. It's the whole idea that if you just inject a bunch of money into a small company with a great idea, you're gonna have success. People think that if you give a small company with a great idea a bunch of money and resources, you're gonna be guaranteed this great product. But that's why so many startup companies fail, because they get this big valuation or investment, which can actually be a death sentence in a certain way. From the sounds of reading Luke Hallowell's write-up, it seemed after big money was injected into Real-Time Worlds is when the game really started to lose its identity and vision as a company, which likely contributed to their poor handling of APB. When Real-Time Worlds received a big injection of cash and personnel, they had people overlapping and essentially serving non-critical roles. As Luke says on his blog, one of the most harmful organizational walls was built between business and development. Once we took that investment, responsibility for anything with the money sign in front fell to a small group of business people, most of them in our US office. This wedge being driven in between the company hurt the way they communicated, and in turn hurt the way they managed APB and spent the money on the title. We built a culture of treating development as completely divorced from business. It doesn't help that the game developers are not used to thinking about the money. Traditional publisher-developer relationships mean that the publisher worries about the money, and all a developer has to do is hire the number of people the publisher says they'll pay for. Everything else is taken care of. We let ourselves sleepwalk into this attitude, and we were spending our own money. It's no wonder Real-Time Worlds went under, and frankly no wonder APB was such a failure. There are so many lessons to be learned after hearing the story of APB and its failure. A whole book could be written on the subject. I really recommend reading Luke's 3 blog posts on the subject, as he can provide intimate details that I only know secondhand. After watching this episode, I hope you have a better understanding of why APB's legacy was so important, and most importantly, why the game failed. I still think at some point in the future we could get a GTA MMO of sorts, though maybe GTA Online is enough for that for some. Still, whoever chooses to work on that title, learn from APB's mistakes, and what little triumphs they had. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. If you liked the video and like to see more Death of a Game videos or videos like them, please hit that subscribe button. If you want updates on when my next videos will be, follow my Twitter. If you want to watch me stream sometime, you can follow my Twitch, which I will start to stream more towards the end of the year. And feel free to join my Discord, where you can meet a group of like-minded gamers and discuss current gaming topics, as well as find people to play games with. If you want to support me more personally and monetarily, please visit my Patreon, where you can support me with a monthly donation, or you can use my Amazon affiliate link, where I get a bit of a kickback from such, and it adds no extra charge to your purchase. That's all I have for you guys. Thanks for watching, and nerdSlayer, out.